right. All right. I think we are live.
Indicates as such on my end.
Oh, okay, cool. So good morning, good evening, good night. Welcome back, everybody, to Punkaste TV. That's usually what I usually start my videos. So we are here today to interview Ulysses. Did I say it correctly? And let me just see, because I think something's echoing here. Is that my end or your end? Do you know?
I don't hear any echo on my end.
You don't hear, so that's perfect then. Anyways, so I'm gonna interview you. Ulysses, you came into my life, I'll be honest, as I was writing my book. And to be honest, up until then, I have never met anybody that share like similar ideas with music, like I had. You know, I just had went through a rebirth, let's put it this way. And so I wanted to get to know a little bit more of your project and get to know a little bit more of your the meaning of music for you and all of it. But first, let's introduce you, and I'll let you talk.
Okay. Yeah, my name is Ulysses Jason Newcomb. I currently living in the Pacific Northwest, doing some research for a book about the meaning of music, and evidently that's because I've been a musician for a long time, and realized after a long time being a musician, music was very important to me, but I didn't know why. So once one of my the biggest musical project I was in ended, I decided that the next step was to try to answer the question about why music. So that's where I'm at. And I host the podcast which you've appeared on, Richard. Very good episode. It's called Music, Meaning, and Mystery. So we explore this idea of the meaning of music and the mystery of music, and it's become like a pilgrimage for me, this podcast, to try to get some insight and some wisdoms from people's relationship to music, and from these conversations about the meaning of music.
That's interesting, because you know, when I came to a point in my life that I actually, you know, music always had a meaning for me, but I came to a point in my life that I'm like, I really need music. And the same way as you, like, I came to, it's like, okay, what's up with that? You know, like, what's the meaning? So did you get any answers?
Well, I entirely expect that I'll never get any answers, but I did get some wisdoms along the way, some insights, and maybe I know a little bit more than I did before I started this project. I'm also pretty new at the project. It's going to be 3 years in this research project now, so it's still pretty young as far as research projects go. So I at the rate I'm going, I expect to be finished within 10 years, but I don't know, we'll see where it goes. Yeah.
10 years. And is there any place that we can actually start accessing some of that wisdom that you are learning from music?
Well, if you want to read some stuff, if you want to find the podcast, you can find the podcast on all the main platforms, Spotify, iTunes, all that jazz. It's called Music, Meaning, and Mystery. And there is a website associated with it called Music, Meaning, and Mystery.ca. And I would welcome people to go there. There is some articles there, but I also post each podcast as an article. And I'm hoping to get people's input on how they feel about the podcast, because the podcast is me kind of reaching out to musicians, to people who love music. And I want it to be like a community thing. So I would like to know what people who are interested in this would want out of the project. So which parts are most interesting to them, so that we can kind of have a conversation and together kind of find some wisdoms as a community of people interested in the meaning of music and the healing power of music, I guess you could say. So I would invite people to check out music, meaning, and mystery.ca. And if it's not quite what you would like, leave a comment on one of the podcasts telling me what it is that you would like. Maybe you'd like more videos. Maybe you'd like a Discord channel, or you'd like to participate in the podcast by leaving a voicemail or something. Whatever it is, your crazy idea, I would love to hear that. So that's the biggest thing that I'm looking for right now, is to hear from people what they make of all this and what it is that they would like going forward.
That's very interesting, and I hope my book actually helps you in some way, somehow, in your research, because I had a really deep meaning, and on that podcast, besides me falling from the chair, that was a really cool conversation.
That's right. Yeah. Well, that was the best part. It got edited out of the podcast, but it was good for me to see you fall out of your chair.
Yeah, I actually, I was, that was one of the reasons why I changed my scenario here a little bit, because I was like, yeah, that minivan chair wasn't working that well, so
Right.
I was like, I was gonna fall one day live, and that's gonna be way worse.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, so is your book out now? Is it out, or is it?
I actually finished putting on Amazon in Portuguese now. Like it's on Amazon Brazil, but I ended up putting on Amazon International now in Portuguese. And I finished the proofreading today of the English
Okay.
version. So now it's gonna come out in a few days, the English.
Oh, cool. Yeah. Let me know, and we'll definitely. I'll want to read that and check that out. I'm
Yeah,
excited.
it's pretty interesting, the whole thing. And like I said, when I met you, like you brought like such a different perspective, that I was like, okay, there's somebody else that thinks like me in terms of
Yeah.
music, that it has a meaning to it. At least for me, it had a meaning. It helped me deal with my depression in so many ways, and that's the story that I tell. And even like I even put in the book like a QR code for the playlist of my favorite songs.
Right.
But a lot of them are philosophical songs that if you like, you kind of really have to stop to listen to it
Uh-huh.
and kind of to feel it,
Uh-huh. Well, my wife was asking, what's this podcast you're going to appear on? And so I told him, punk rocker dad. And so she had listened to the podcast, and she's like, oh, what's it about? I'm like, this Richard guy, he's like a machine, like this, the triathlon, and he decided that he would learn instruments, and now he's like knows, like, I don't know, like 10 Iron Maiden riffs. He's learning an Iron Maiden riff a day or something. He's got this podcast. You look at the website, there's like 28 things going on there, and plus he's a father. And yeah, I'm like, this guy just like, it just hoovers up all this like success power. Like, so I'm excited to read about your book, because I'm sure that like there will be some things I can learn from the way you went about kind of dealing with your challenges and stuff. I'm looking forward to it.
It's funny because, like, first of all, I don't see it as success. Like in my mind, I'm like, every time I record my Iron Maiden videos, I'm like, this is horrible. Like, because I know the song so well, and I've
I
heard it
know.
so many freaking times live.
Yeah.
in studio. You know what I mean? Like, but I think like when you see it that way, it's like, yeah, I'm learning like a lot of like it always been my passion and a meaning for me in my life. And it's like
Yeah.
once I was like, oh, I can't do that without being a bad person. I was like, just give me everything, you know.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
But
The floodgates have opened now.
yeah, and it's funny because I think it merged into your whole meaning. Like I think music has a much more deeper meaning, and it's a very powerful feeling, right?
Hmm. Yeah. Big time for sure.
Yeah,
Yeah. And it's not about being like a refined musician or anything like that. It's an exploration, you know. If you listen to a lot of these shamans like singing, a 2 hour ear, they don't always sound good. Sometimes they'll still sing flat or something, but it's because they have a completely different purpose with their music. It's not about entertainment or amazing someone with your skill, your how fast you can play or whatever. It's not a spectacle. It's making a connection, a special kind of connection. So I think we've deformed with the Industrial Revolution and with the, I don't want to be anti-capitalist because I think capitalism has done a lot of good things, but I think, having everything be turned into capital, maybe we forgot the values of certain things.
oh, yeah,
We're not sure how to value music other than, what kind of money it can make us, or, or the kind of attention it can get. But lately, so I've been in a band. I was in a band several years. I've been making music since I was 15 years old. So I'm 43 now. So that's a long time.
yeah.
And right now is where I'm getting the most connection and the most fulfillment out of music. And all I do is I sit in my living room and I sing. I practice throat singing, and it's a solo practice. It's not for a concert. I don't have any goals with it. It's just to make a connection. And it works, right? When you sing and your breath, you control your breath, you change your entire body and you phase into this other dimension almost.
Yeah,
And you make contact with spirit, right? And it's like, I don't need a music career to make contact with spirit, right?
exactly. Yeah,
And I think also because the nature of music is like a making contact with spirit, I see in popular music various different faiths almost. So there's a good book called Secret History of Rock and Roll by Chris Knowles, where he
I bought it
compares.
after I talked
Yeah,
to
you
you. I
got that.
bought it.
Okay,
Yeah, I
okay.
started. I'm finishing reading, and it's amazing. Like I
Yeah.
actually want to touch the subject with you a little bit.
Okay, well, we'll do that. So
Yeah,
he kind of explains he makes a really good case about how a lot of these genres of music correlate to a lot of ancient religious movements, not just like in the sound, but the way people dress and the sorts of the sort of like a lifestyle that went along with it. So like kind of the Dionysian excesses of the Led Zeppelin era, it was like kind of bacchanalian sort of, right? And I kind of see the sort of like rock star on the stage preaching to an audience as a sort of like a priestly role, or some sort of, because a priest is basically, his function is to facilitate a ritual so that the congregation can make contact with a higher dimension, so God. But like in the case of Led Zeppelin, they're channeling something else, right? So, but it's sort of the same model, the same model of priestly class and the audience. But there's no there's nothing that says that you can't have your own spiritual practice outside the church, the concert church, by having your own relationship to music that isn't about preaching to a choir. Right? You can still just sing or play your guitar or, you know, learn the flute and strive to make that contact. That contact is available there. And the ancient church had the same thing. They had the church, the infrastructure, which was like the official way to get to God, but they all also had these borderline heretical monasteries and monks whose kind of purpose was to demonstrate that you didn't need the church to get to God, right? But, you know, somehow it gets integrated, but there's like a bit of a transgressive mystery there. And I think that's what goes on with music a little bit. I kind of, you don't need to think any of what I say is true. It's like a model for thinking about music. It'll give you a clue as to what I think may be in music. You know, the map is not the territory. I'm just drawing a map now to kind of inspire people that someone like you're saying like, well, I don't think I sound like much, but maybe you do, maybe you don't. That's up to people to decide. But are you making connection? That's,
well,
yeah.
I was going to say, like, this for me, like when I founded my band, I actually was like, because of my history with the Catholic Church, I was like, I'm going to make a religion out of spite, you know, like,
Yeah.
But what I really wanted to do was a band, you know, which I became a one-man band in a way. And like when I play, it's a meditation, you know, like for me, it's a meditation, or prayer or whatever you want to call it. But it is a way of connecting. It is a way of the reason I did the channel was more to be motivated, to be like, hey, you know what? I dealt with depression for years because of like many things that happened in my life. You know, I'm learning the guitar here at 41, 40 years old, you know, like you're never too old to do something. So my idea was that, because I was an athlete before, so I wanted to make it more motivational. But for me, like personally, it's a moment of meditation or like prayer or whatever you want to fit in. It's like I'm doing for a sole purpose, you know, like it's something like way bigger than me. It's more like making a connection, like you said. And which that brings me to an experience. Like when you start talking, probably to an experience that I had, and I feel like I had to mention, because this band, it's considered like one of the heaviest band ever, which is Slayer. So when I moved to Colorado, Slayer was doing the final tour. And I was like, man, it was always my dream to see Slayer live. Like I have a whole connection with Slayer as a kid with my brother, and he made me, you know, I have a whole story in my book. And Slayer like really helped me at the heaviest times of my life. Like he really, really helped me. And so I was like, I can't miss this. The final tour, that's my last chance to ever see the guys live. So I went, and I went by myself. I didn't know anybody in Colorado and anything like that. It was just for me. That was like just for me. And I remember it was kind of like full moon. It was awesome. But at the end of the show, Tom Araya, man, like he went to each corner of the stage, and you could feel his gratitude of like to the people, you know, like the energy was so strong that night. I was like, man, this is like, I have goosebumps just by remembering, because it was such an intense, energetic moment in there, you know, like that I was like, wow, man, this is really, you know, like on that time I was even, I had just bought the guitar. I had the guitar. I had just moved to Colorado. So my guitar was sitting in a box. And after that show, I went to the guitar. I was like, you know what? I think I need to start, you know, doing it again. But it was one of the most amazing experiences that I had in my life. You know, like,
so it's interesting. You said you had goosebumps. Your body, how did it feel to be in your body in that moment?
Oh, I was like, it's almost like I was in another dimension, literally.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
Like something between the real world and the spiritual world, like
Yeah.
exactly like I was floating,
Yeah.
you
Yeah.
know, and
Yeah. I understand. Well, that's interesting because I've been doing a little bit of research in ecstasy. So not the drug, but also the drug. Um, the Greek word for ecstasy is ecstasis, and that means outside of yourself. So it's you know, you heard the expression, the English expression, like I was beside myself.
no, yeah,
Like there was something so shocking or so big that happened. I was beside myself, right?
I have a story for you.
Okay, okay. Do you want to tell me the story?
No, go ahead. I don't want to lose. I don't want to lose the train of thought. But
Okay, okay, yeah, no problem. So I've been interested in what happens to the body when we have like particularly strong musical experiences. And I even saw when you were describing your experience, you were making the motion up
yeah,
as
yeah,
if your body is elevated. Well, I mean, you grew up in the Christian tradition, you left that tradition, but I mean, where did Christ go upon death? Where's heaven? It's an up, it's transcendent, it's
yeah,
above your own body. So there's something about music that has the ability to create ecstasy, the ecstatic state. And that's the state that shamans use to talk to the spirit world, to make contact with the spirits and go heal their community by dealing with the community's soul. They're on the level of the soul, the level of the spirit, right? So there's something, I think, my guess is there's something inherently you can't get around the fact that music has a spiritual component, because it has that ability to do something to the body, literally, but the whole body, right? Because you're talking about another dimension. So the body is part of all these other dimensions, right?
yeah.
Well, I don't know. There's something strange and weird going on with music.
Yeah, I don't know, like the way I feel, the way you said it, like describe it with ecstasy. A lot of people use psychedelic for to treatment of depression because basically you get in contact and you kind of heal on a soul level, and it kind of makes sense to me if music have that power to, at least to some people, not necessarily everybody's this way, but to some people, like that kind of could explain psychiatry and frequencies, and like a little bit of.
Yeah.
It's very interesting, like the power that you can go to with music.
Yeah. And I think it's especially important because we've kind of as a race, especially in the West, North America is especially, I think, has this tendency of assuming health is about the molecules in your body. Well, it is, but it's not just about this, right? It's like health is not, well, I feel sick, take a pill, and it'll change molecules, everything will be fine.
Yeah.
Especially when it comes to mental health, especially when it comes to depression and anxiety and that sort of thing. I mean, where's the anxiety molecule? Like,
Yeah.
can you put your depression, how long is your depression? Can you put it on a scale? Those sorts of health issues aren't material based necessarily, right? They could be, but if you ask someone who suffers from like deep depression, which you had experience with this, I've had my fair share of it, and you ask them like if your soul is sick or if you lost your soul or you feel like you don't have a soul, that would be an accurate description of what's going on.
Yeah.
Well, there's no medical treatment that's going to get your soul back.
Exactly.
Right?
Exactly.
So we need more tools. And I think one of those is music. We got to try to understand what this music thing is and kind of get out of this idea that it's just an entertainment, it's just disposable, it's non-essential, right? We've heard that word a
Yeah.
lot. I think we have to kind of figure out what it is that our ancestors did with music and why is it that they thought of it as essential? Why was it so deeply embedded into the community, right? So,
Yeah.
yeah, well, I can't figure it out. So I need help. You know what
Yeah.
I mean?
Well, I can definitely help. I think my book is gonna help you with that in a way, and I think in two ways because, uh, well, first, like let me tell you the story that I wanted to tell. Oh, actually, let me ask you this. So, would you think like would you consider like when you say the person is elevated, you would say like it's like astral projection or astral travel, like many people say, or
Well, again, there's a lot of ways to map a territory. So I kind of think of these things as models, right? So is it astral projection? Is it contact with God? Is it spirit communication? I think these are all models that have different uses, different utilities, and are on a spectrum of truthfulness, right? So I don't know what it is. I will say this. I read this book called, I think it's called The Monk Who Flew, about a Joseph, Saint Joseph of Cupertino. This is a guy who multiple reports in history, 17th, I think 16th, 17th century Italy, different towns that he went to that were not connected. And you got to understand that towns back then, to be in a different town was kind of like a little bit to be on a different planet. It was, communication was by letter and most people couldn't read. So there weren't that many letters, right?
yeah,
So the fact that he's getting unconnected reports of being a guy who would intermittently and apparently randomly levitate. So the elevation being literal, right?
yeah.
So, and one of the triggers of his levitation was when he would hear the choir sing in the church. So I think there's something that can happen. I mean, this is wild shit. I get it, right?
Yeah.
It's
Yeah,
a
of course.
lot to swallow.
Yeah.
But I mean, I can lift my hand. I can make my hand defy gravity with my mind.
Mhm.
There's mechanics involved, but it's just one step more to lift the entire body with the mind, right? We
Yeah.
want to get into consciousness research and all that. I don't know, right? I'm not. What do I know, right? But
Yeah.
people said they saw this guy fucking go up, right? So it's like, and there's hundreds of people in different towns. So it just seems a little too far-fetched for me to think that it was a hoax.
Yeah.
I mean, it's just too much involved, right?
Yeah.
So I'll just leave it at that. So you're asking me what it is. This
Yeah.
sensation of levitation is astral projection. I think that's the best way I can answer it. It's like, who knows how far that thing goes
Exactly.
when you go completely in that strangeness? We don't know, right? We know the effects of, Tylenol because we put billions of dollars and years of research into it. But how many $billion did we put into, the transcending the soul with music?
Do you know why I actually stopped being a health coach pretty much? Like I coach people for triathlon, but for health, for me became very difficult because with my history and the fact that I start my depression by eating a lot of sugar and stuff like that. I came to a conclusion that health is about mind, body, and soul. And it doesn't matter what diet you do or exercise plan that you do. If you don't fix in the soul level, nothing that you do in the physical level will ever change. Like you might band-aid, you might lose weight for a little while, and then you gotta kind of come back gaining the weight again. That happened with me several times, and then I was like, okay, health depends of more, like and the reason I ask you that the astral projection is because Ironman 2011. I was doing my first paid race, and like I panic in a starting underwater. But after I panic, I kind of like I started just concentrating on my breathing, and that whole entire race, I literally it felt like I was watching my body do the race.
Yeah.
Like my wife would talk to me on the run. Like people would say stuff. I'll be just like completely out of my body. Just the sensation it felt for like 10 hours plus. Wow. That I was watching my body do the whole entire freaking race. I crossed the finish line. I get to feel myself again, and I start crying like a baby. Yeah. And my wife asked, like, what happened? I'm like, I don't know. That was it. That was my only answer. And my book, I ask because my book has a lot of like astral travel like that, like a few things. But I had a lot of experience my entire life, from dreaming, daydreaming, meditating, and with music. It's kind of weird. And when you said, I was like, that I'll be interesting to try to understand a little bit more. But
well, I don't know is the best answer, right?
I
mean, when you run for 10 hours and you watch yourself run, I mean, I don't know. It's who knows what that is, right? But the thing is it is something.
It is something,
yeah. So
it's like
I just
vu. Like having déjà vu. It's like it is something, but like yes, you may not be able to explain. You don't know, but it is something that is happening. So kind of like.
There's something beeping. I want to turn it off. Sorry, just in case that's disturbing. Yeah. Well, we went deep into it right away, didn't we?
Yeah. Well, I was going to ask you about your article because it's interesting because in your article you mentioned Elvis Presley, and I think a lot of the rock and roll, it's the devil song. It started with Elvis Presley, I think, right? I don't know. Like I heard some stuff that started on that area, but anyways, my brother like sent me that week before I talked to you, before you sent me. He sent me a song from Elvis. It's like, hey, check this out, man, because we talk a lot of rock and roll. And then I was reading your article. You had like a whole explanation with the dance and like a lot of cool things. So I would like you to talk a little bit more on that.
Yeah. So Elvis is a very interesting character. I don't think he's the originator of rock and roll. His managers, I feel it's important to say, I don't want to diminish Elvis's contribution to the history of music. I think he was extremely talented and had amazing charisma. The success he got was not for no reason. Also a very just good looking guy, so he had all of but his manager, when he found Elvis, he knew he was the guy. I don't know exactly how it goes. Elvis was the answer to what he was looking for, and he was looking for a white guy who could sing like a black guy, right? Because the idea back then, whether they were right or wrong, was that it's difficult to market black singers, right? They were proven wrong in the long run, but whether they were right at the time, who knows, right? But so if whatever Elvis started, someone else started before him,
Oh,
right?
right.
Right. And it was very likely that the black music that started, without black music, there's no Elvis. That's basically it.
That's basically it.
Yeah. And I got interested in Elvis because I don't know why, I started watching old YouTube videos of Elvis. And, I pay attention to what people do. And then he was doing like the dance thing where he does the hips. But I noticed that when he would do that, he would bring his hand up like that. And when he would do that kind of movement, the girls in the crowd would go insane, right? And it was with the hands, he was like controlling the crowd. He could quiet them down, and then he'd do like the hand thing. And it was like he was blasting these girls with like lightning or something. And when I saw that, I'm like, it's like he's calling forth some sort of spirit, some sort of erotic spirit onto these girls, right? It was wholesome, but erotic, right? So I looked into Elvis, like, and he was asked where he learned his dance moves, because at the time it was very controversial. The hip thing, it was like the American public thought it was going to, kind of upset the natural order of things or something, right? Like, because people are afraid of sexuality sometimes and sexual liberation. So Elvis answered that he learned his dance move at his Pentecostal church, right? So I was like, what? That is not my mental image of a Pentecostal church, right?
Not at all, man.
No. But I went on YouTube I just like started searching Pentecostal church, and I found footage. Some churches are putting footage of their services on YouTube. And what's the music they use? It's rock and roll. Okay. Wow. So the whole thing, because their idea is they interpret, there's a portion of the Bible that says to make a glorious noise to your God, something like that. So they're like, well, let's make a glorious noise. So they play rock and roll, and they do like these very simple kind of chord patterns, which they repeat over and over again, so that a lot of the congregation can join in. You have like old guys playing guitar, and then this young guy playing the organ or whatever, and then the people in the audience dance, and they enter like this ecstatic state. Now they're going to say they're bringing forth the Holy Spirit, but I'm trying to put it in a different map so we can think about it a little bit different. Yeah. So with this music, they enter an ecstatic state. You'll see that they're like running around this church, like a tiny little church. They're running laps around the pews, right? And these like old women are like getting down. They got their walkers, and they're like, smashing their walkers around, and they're like having a good time. And it's like, they do this every Sunday in like towns in America, everywhere, right? I didn't know this. And then
I didn't know either.
Yeah, and then I was looking at the dances they make. They're not dances. They're kind of like letting themselves follow the spirit. Yeah. But a lot of the moves they make look like what Elvis did.
Well, so they're evoking Elvis.
Or they're making contact with the same thing that Elvis made contact with, and Elvis just like kept doing it while he was making his music. So the music has something in common. So it's a lot of like the hips go down and the legs move weird and they do the hand thing, but it's not choreographed. They're just kind of going like nuts, right? So it got me thinking that what Elvis was doing was like a more erotic version of what he had learned at the church, right?
Yeah.
And you have like these masses of young women that are being like turned on, right, by this spirit that Elvis is bringing down through the medium of music and dance.
That's so interesting.
Yeah, it's weird
That's
stuff,
so
man. Yeah.
Do you know what it's weird? Because after that Slayer concert, I started writing a book, and I started to play and started to research my book. Like because I reconnect with old friends, kind of like in a way, from like it was a way of researching to my book. And one day I was actually listening to Motorhead. Like I went to drop it off my mother-in-law at the airport, and then I'm driving back and I'm listening to Motorhead. And I was listening to Rocket, that song that say rock and roll is no crime.
Okay.
And that's when I was like, you know what? Yeah, like I should do that, but it felt almost like it was Lemmy talking to me. And since that day I started to meditate a lot more, especially 2020. Like for me, being sensitive, it was like some of those moons was completely insane, man. Like I felt it really strong, the energy. And in a lot of meditations I kind of saw Lemmy like in my visions.
Mm.
I was like, holy crap, like why is this guy here? But like a lot of the songs that I created in my album, like came after that. I meditated, I saw Lemmy, and then I would go to my little studio here, and then I put it in a song, and ended up putting like, I don't know, 9 songs together.
Okay, so when you saw Lemmy, you just saw Lemmy, or did you
Just his
interact, or
face. That was just his face.
and you
Yes.
just see him?
Yeah.
And when you
And it felt like he was kind of saying something. I was like receiving, but he wasn't like truly speaking. I was just paying attention and sitting like face to face with him, pretty much.
Okay.
So,
Well, it's interesting because you're sporting a little bit of the Lemmy beard.
well, I did it on purpose.
Yeah.
And it's
Yeah.
funny because do you see the leprechaun Lemmy back there?
Yeah.
Let me get it. There's a funny story with this. I was going through Instagram and I saw this leprechaun Lemmy.
Okay.
And I was like, dude, I gotta have this, right? Yeah. I was like, I gotta, this is really punk. And I order it, and it comes from like somewhere in, like, I don't know, it's really far in Asia. And I was like, okay, it's an artist there. So I ordered, and it's been like, I don't know, 8 weeks and then nothing. So I email the person, and then I said like, hey, what is it? And then this like, well, it's coming soon. And I swear to God, man, they sent me the tracking, and then the tracking is like getting in the plane and like going all the steps, right? Coming from somewhere in Shanghai or whatever. And then I'm checking, and then after a while, like I didn't see the airplane anymore. And it's been like another 8 weeks. And nothing about this and nothing about the tracking. I emailed the person, I couldn't get a hold of them. I went to the store, online store, I couldn't see anything. Then one day at my door, this shows up, like in the package. I was like, cool. And then I was like, maybe this is gonna be one of the kind stuff, but it was just so weird that out of a sudden I didn't have contact with the person, anything. But I was like, well, at least I got my Lemmy, because I thought like I got screwed in $30, but whatever.
Yeah. So when you see the face, do you have a feeling or
It's a feeling. Yeah, it's a feeling, very strong feeling. Like it first, my first feeling was of safety. I just felt like safe, and whole in a way. And that's how kind of like I started healing my depression. And I was actually talking to my wife about this. It's like, once I realized like what was wrong with me, I kept going to that inner child and reacting like a child instead of, being present. But it's almost like in an energetic level. And when I start meditating and I start seeing Lemmy and start feeling comfortable with doing rock and roll, I just started feeling safe and whole. And then my whole life started getting better and better and better. Like every now and then I go a little cuckoo, but I snap back out of it. And especially like now that I'm doing the 21 days of Iron Maiden song, it's each day I do it, I feel much better because I was afraid of actually doing that. I was afraid of playing the devil songs based on the culture that I grew up. I was literally afraid. And the more I do it, the better I feel. And it's almost like, it's kind of like, let's say depression. I'm like, my spirit is down here. The more I do it, the more present with my body I feel like, and then the healthier I feel. So it's a very strong feeling of safety and health and warmth, something like that.
What's your favorite Motorhead song?
Orgasmatron. That was actually, I learned that song 2 weeks before I got the guitar. I think it was June 8th. My wife gave it to me as a wedding and my birthday gift. And so I went home and was like, man, I gotta, because my whole story is like, I actually wrote a email because I built my son's crib in his room listening to Peace of Mind, Iron Maiden. And when I finished organizing the room, I sat down and I wrote an email for him saying like, hey, I just finished organizing. I wrote a few emails before he was born, so he kind of knew what was going on. And I wrote like, hey, just finished organizing your room. I was listening to this album. It's one of my favorite bands in the world. And I don't know if you're going to like it, but it's something that helped me my entire life. And, and then after that is when I told my therapist that I wanted to do music. And she asked me like, why don't you do something that you are afraid of? Like, well, playing the guitar, it's something that makes me really afraid. So I got the guitar, and then 2 weeks before he was born, I promised myself that I was going to learn at least one song, and Orgasmatron was the song that I chose to do.
Nice.
So, and it's my favorite. And actually, my brother used to have a band, and they used to rehearsal that song quite a few times in my house. So it has a lot of meaning to it.
I'll have to revisit it. I can't remember how it goes right now. I'll check it out after. Yeah.
It's I Am the One, Orgasmatron. My name is called Religion, Sadistic, Sacred Whore. And then he says, I am the politician and I decide your fate. It's a freaking love. I love this song.
Okay, I'll go check it out. I haven't listened to Motorhead in a long time.
Yeah. Well, what else you have to say when it comes in terms of meaning of music? I know we're getting close to 1 hour, and then don't want to take too much of your time, but every time I talk to you, it's kind of like a light bulb lights up in my mind. And
let's see.
Well, I actually have a question of this book, which I must say I have to read it slowly because it has a lot of meaning to me, because that rock and roll literally saved my soul. I always believe in that, even though everybody else said that I was crazy, but I always believed that had the meaning. So let's talk a little bit about this book, because
okay.
When you suggested to me, I was like, holy crap, it's almost everything I ever believed in my life. And when I got it, and I opened here, it's like there's so many of my favorite bands, like the Ramones, and Iron Maiden, and AC/DC, and all of them. The guy has a meaning and like a track to it. It's like it's unbelievable. So I would love to hear your let's say, your opinion, because you've been researching this and for a while now, and I would like to hear your opinion about the book, because I think it's a book that everybody should read.
Yeah, it's definitely interesting. I mean, it's not like an academic text. Not that an academic text is superior. Just, it's distinct from someone who's from academia. So it's going to veer off the path of like sanctioned knowledge. So basically, he basically says that different genres of music are echoes of different ancient religious movements. So, for instance, like bands like Pink Floyd, King Crimson, they were a little bit more like tinkerers. They spent a lot of time in the studio, kind of taking samples and sounds and putting them through various effects to create this sense of entrancement, so he calls them kind of like alchemists.
No, yeah.
Right, where
you talk about on that article that of Elvis, right? Or there's another article that I read that you talk about Alchemist.
Yeah, possibly. Yeah, I'm trying to think. Yeah, so the Alchemist's goal, as near as I can tell, which is, I'm not an alchemist. I'm going to try to interview an alchemist for the podcast. Actually, he put out a zine all about music, and it's wild.
That's cool. That's cool.
Yeah, his name's Brian Contnoir. Anyway, he's a guy from New York. I actually met him briefly in Seattle one time at a esoteric book conference. He was doing a lecture on dreams. But yeah, he's an alchemist, and so the alchemists are basically, they work with materials, so matter, so copper and various plants, to make kind of like potions, or they're called them spagyrics or something like that you ingest, that kind of can heal you but change you, right? Yeah. But the process of making, so one of the ingredients in their various metals they make, or spagyrics they make, is them. So the person making the thing has to be in a certain state of mind in order for the thing to have the result it's supposed to have. Yeah. So it's kind of like having a relationship with nature in order to make contact with the spirit and matter. So the bands that use like a lot of effects, a lot of sampling, and are kind of like do a lot of experimentation and let the gear kind of have a say into how the music goes. That my band used to be like that, right? Yeah. I modified my whole gear setup to get a certain sound, but you never get the exact sound you want. But those accidents, you let them tell you that's where the sound is supposed to go. So it's having a relationship with the matter, so the gear, the microchips, the wires, all the, not microchips, but transistors. And so it's assuming all that stuff is alive and has an agency, so that when something happens, it's part of the band too. So you kind of jam with it, right?
Oh, I see. Yeah.
Yeah. So it's the matter is alive, but the way that you interact with it, the relationship is the music, right? Yeah. So that's kind of like an alchemical. So Chris Chris's idea in the book is that bands like King Crimson and Pink Floyd had this philosophy, and without really knowing were kind of being an echo of those ancient alchemists. Yeah, that's one example. And then Elvis, he likens Elvis to like an Apollonian figure. So Apollo, obviously the god of music, but also it's like he's like a sun god.
Yeah.
Like a god of light. So like Elvis kind of came on the scene kind of like as a rising sun, right? A rising star, the sun is the star. So yeah, I quote him in that article. Even if you look at Elvis's later career when he was like fat and like he was on drugs and you can tell like he talks. There's one performance that I linked to in that article where he's obviously like out of his mind. He's not, it's like he was gonna die not long after. That was his Vegas years. And he slurs, you can tell he's not there, but then he starts playing the piano and starts singing Unchained Melody. And it's like everything gone. It's like the Elvis that was fat and drunk and slurring and on pills or whatever he was is gone. And and then it's Elvis. And he's sweating because he's like a fat guy and he's like on cocaine and shit, right? But like he's like possessed. I think he couldn't help but be kind of a channel for something really like intense. Yeah, he's a fascinating dude, this Elvis guy.
Do you think that these guys, they know that they're doing that? Or because like I have an idea of when it comes to sensitivity and like feeling things like this, like you're treated such a crazy person from society that people go to drug to kind of try to numb that. But I like sometimes I wonder if those guys have an idea about what is really going on, if there is something greater than them, or they're just, like they're just doing it for whatever.
No, they know. Elvis put together a series of in his series of Las Vegas concerts, he put together like gospel songs. No. So he had a different map for what was going on, but he was definitely had an awareness that what he was doing was making contact with something above him, right? So he just had a different way of mapping it. Yeah.
So you think that those Slayer, Iron Maiden, AC/DC, they kind of have an idea of like they're doing something, or they're channeling, or they're getting that inspiration for something greater, and they probably feel like I must do this, and they're kind of like the lucky ones who actually got to get paid and do it.
Well, a lot of this is limited by one's vocabulary, basically, by one's language. Mm-hmm. So they're hustling and working a crazy amount of time, and they're on tour, and everything's a whirlwind. They're not like me, where I'm like in my living room and once in a while I sing, but most of the time I'm reading like these weird books, right? Mm-hmm. So I have I've developed a sort of language so that I can kind of look at this from different angles.
Okay. Yeah.
But I think these guys are just in it. So they're not thinking about like, is this astral travel, or is this like, they don't have it, like they're just rocking out. But I'm sure that they're aware.
Just living the dream, right?
They're in it, and that's actually a perfect way of putting it. Living the dream. The dream is not the dream. Oh, it's my dream to be a rock star. It's like it's a dream.
Greater.
Yeah, exactly. It's another world. Yeah. So it's like, can a fish like analyze what what water is, it just lives in it.
It just lives in it.
Right. So I think they're being fish for the most part. But I mean, like Jimmy Page had an awareness of like definitely the spiritual side of it. If you read the biographies, he was doing occult rituals, and if you read between the lines of when he talks about, like Stairway to Heaven, for instance, you can tell that he believes that he caused Robert Plant to channel the lyrics to Stairway to Heaven. So he was like a little bit more deliberate about it. And there's a lot of musicians that kind of have an awareness of it. There's I won't be able to remember what it is, but there's a band, a guy I heard interviewed on a YouTube channel, really interesting YouTube channel called Rebel Wisdom. And he's kind of like coming out of his kind of closet, if you will, his like sensitive person closet.
Yeah.
And now he's talking about like, well, all those hit songs that he put out in the UK, they were like mantras or they were like kind of like spiritual things, right? So there's a lot of them that are aware of what's going on, but I think I don't think Lemmy ever expected that after he died that he would be visiting some writer in Colorado, right? Lemmy just liked whiskey and PCP and playing slot machines, right? Like it,
but he was like
he's in it.
Yeah, but he had a great heart. I mean, the guy was like, it's like he was a badass with like such a big heart, like on his funeral, Dave Grohl actually spoke saying like the Lemmy was the kind of guy, he was saying like a story that he got into his room before his changing room before a show, and Lemmy was like talking stuff with smoking and drinking, and then he saw that like the Dave Grohl's kids were there, so he hid it like the cigar and the drinks, like, oh, I'm sorry, I didn't know your kids were here. But that was the kind of guy that he was, like he had a huge heart. And, to be honest, I don't know if Steve Harris knows this, but I will, like, one of my dreams is to give at least Iron Maiden and Slayer my book in their hands. Like, dude, guys, thank you, because it's like, it helped me so many freaking times in my life that,
that'd be cool. Yeah.
Like I think that would be very cool. I can do it with Lemmy, but I can do with who's alive still.
Yeah. Did you ever listen to Lemmy's previous band, his first band, Hawkwind?
No, I never. I actually started reading his autobiography, but I never really heard that. It's pretty wild stuff. It's pretty wild. Yeah, he said like they were really, really noisy. I was like, okay, that's.
Yeah, it's like it's not something that I listen to for pleasure. It's a weird band. And they're pretty. You could tell like they're at the tail end of the whole psychedelic thing, right? And it's like just this. Just like psychedelic masturbation music almost. Like they have this song that's and it's all like sounds like improvised. Yeah. There's one song that's called "It's Time We Leave This Place Today" or something, and it's like just like they just repeat that thing and it just goes up and up, more and more noise. They were like a psych rock band, pretty cool stuff. Yeah. It's worth listening to. It's like Sun Ra, but not good.
It's so funny that I saw a video the other day on YouTube, and the guy would put it as like, this is me playing the guitar with LSD. And then he played like the riff, it's okay, but he played the riff, and then I saw one comment like, man, at that moment and in that time, it was the best riff he ever done in his life. Yeah. And then it's like, most likely, man. But,
yeah.
Well, I have one more question before we finish. I know in our podcast, like in one moment we talk about it, like about repression with the church against rock and roll and all of that kind of jazz. And we ended up questioning ourselves, like, do you think that they do that on purpose or not? And so far in your research, which you said that it's probably going to take 10 years, which is interesting because I heard that this decade, 2020 to 2030, spiritually speaking, is a very important decade. And when you said 10 years, that kind of caught my mind a little bit, because it's like, well, it's exactly the 10 years that it's a very spiritual. But anyways, so do you have any take on that? Do you still think it's on purpose in a way, or you don't think it's on purpose? You think it's just like unconscious that they do it, or?
Mm-hmm. Well, the church is made up of people. And if you look at the history of the church, I read one history of Christianity, and things change, right? Mm-hmm. One pope comes in, and then all of a sudden, a certain belief is heretical, and then the next pope comes in and they have a debate, and then it isn't, right? The view on sin changed. It used to be that sin was kind of like very, like the pardon of sin. It was very prescriptive. So it's like, okay, you stole a loaf of bread. Okay, that means 10 Hail Marys, and then, some, I think it was it St. Francis, I think, comes by, and it's like, he's a little bit heretical in that he says, well, the sin, we should consider the context of the sin and the sinner before we prescribe like the forgiveness, or what is it, penitence?
The penitence, yeah.
Yeah, because if you say you steal a loaf of bread, but you're so poor that if you don't steal the bread, you're going to die. Well, that's killing yourself. That's suicide. That's a sin. So which is which, right? So it starts. Yeah. So things change, right? And then there's different individuals within the church in different nations, because now it's a global thing. So to say, does the church seek to suppress rock music? I don't think that we can say that, because the church is not a single thing. But if you look at even just the architecture of a church, it's designed to have an outer perimeter, and in the center a sacred space, right? And if you go on the outside of churches, you're going to see gargoyles often. Monsters.
Yeah.
Demons? I don't know. So these monsters are there at the outside because there is an outside to the church, because the monsters aren't part of the sacred center, but the monsters are part of the whole
church.
The whole church, and they face outside. And what do? They make monstrous expressions to scare away the even worse monsters, the really bad monsters,
the big ones.
So there are some monstrous things that are in the service of the church's God. So, it's not easy for somebody in the modern world, because things have changed so much, right?
Yeah.
It changed so fast. Technology, internet, everything just exploded in the last 200 years, right? So you have a tradition that's 2,000 years old that all of a sudden meets with an explosion of change, an explosion of monsters. It's gonna miss a step when it comes to deciding what are the bad monsters and what are the good monsters, right? So, which is unfortunate because a lot of people are going to get hurt in the process, right?
Yeah.
But these traditions from our ancestors don't operate at the same speed of that modern life operates. So, which is their strength and arguably is also their weakness.
Their weakness, yeah.
Right. So when all of a sudden Iron Maiden comes out and they've got like Eddie on the cover and it's this zombie guy, well, it's not going to be obvious that that's going to be of good service to the people of the church, but to you, because you experience it, you understand, right?
Well, Eddie is just protecting the spirits of rock and roll.
There you go. Yeah. So,
You know what I
but
mean?
within the church, there are always people who are kind of on the outside, heretical, like the monks. Like we think now, oh, the monks are like, oh, they're so holy and all that. But back then, they were kind of the rock and roll guys,
No, yeah.
because they weren't. There's a reason why the monasteries, the monks weren't in the church. They were in the monasteries,
Mhm.
right? Which was in the wilderness, the desert, the outside,
Yeah.
right? And they kind of like helped. Their mission was to kind of like be the outside people, but their connection to God was direct, which made the church uncomfortable, because if you can make a direct connection with God, you don't need a church.
You
Do
don't
you?
need a church, so they lose the institution.
Yeah.
They lose their money making.
Yeah. So, but looking at it from the church's perspective is, if we let everything be an outside thing, then we lose the center. So I'm not going to say who's right, who's wrong.
No, it's a matter of control, and like in my view, in the way I experience, like I think is what they need to look at the perspective is that music is healing, and their purpose of a church representing God, I think, is to allow people to heal their soul.
Yeah.
Therefore, if music is medicine, like, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
And historically, we know that music has been used for ages for that, So that's where, like my whole idea of the book was actually to kind of stir up a little bit of, in a sense of like, hey, like you said, I think we need to look at music in a different way.
Yeah.
Like I'm not offended. Like I usually play, I'm not offended, but I do think that the Pope was an asshole for canceling Iron Maiden. But looking at that perspective too, I can understand. It's like maybe they were like, well, this is a little too much. But I don't know. I had some respect because it was only in one country, and I don't know. Like you can kind of go into a little bit of the New Age and the Kundalini. I think it's Kundalini being in Chile on that period of time.
Yeah, it's kind
of like the vibration could have cheered up something else.
Yeah, the Kali Yuga.
Yeah. So, and then what could have been the word with a different energetic perspective. So kind of like it's a sensitive touch, and I think that's why I'm taking so long to read this book, because it goes so deep into the roots of many of, like, because my only belief was like, okay, this is good, this is healing, but I didn't know anything until I actually met you. And then I was like, well, somebody else is thinking like me too, not just entertaining, it's something else into it. But
well, I'll put it this way. I mean, the church didn't win that battle. Right. So maybe the church in general has learned it's got bigger fish to fry, rather than trying to put out these fires. I don't know. I keep tabs on what's going on the, like, kind of the forefront of the Christian tradition, because I was, I'm of a nation that is of that tradition. So I keep abreast of it. And the people who are having the interesting conversations within those circles aren't worried about rock and roll,
No, okay.
right? They're more like calling for uh, re-embracing the story of the church that can bring people healing. Because if you think about it, the story of Christ is pretty fucking metal, right?
Yeah, it's pretty
Yeah,
punk. I even
yeah,
say like, and you know, it's funny because the Bible doesn't put like his ages from 12 to 30. There's nothing like in between, and usually as a human form, 12 to 30, it's probably the wildest years of your life,
yeah.
you know. So that's pretty punk, and because they took that out of it, I'm like, no, I think if you put it in there, let's hear the real truth, because I think it's pretty punk. I mean, he was
Yeah,
pretty wild, but they kind of like uncover that part of it. It's
yeah,
not fair.
yeah, that's true. I never thought about that. Yeah, but
Well,
even
at least
like
my
his
12 to until I got married, it was pretty wild. So it's
right,
like
right.
I'm speaking from my experience.
I understand. Yeah, yeah. I know it's an interesting thing to think about.
Yeah,
They're big things. So I mean, whatever I say, I expect that I'll probably be 100% wrong,
yeah, me
because
too.
it's very complicated. But I don't know. We're it's fun to have a relationship with those ideas, and to come to one's own conclusions.
Yeah, I think
Um,
so too.
yeah,
It's almost like everybody needs to find their own religion in a way to connect.
yeah, yeah,
For me, it's learning Iron Maiden songs.
yeah. There you go. And it's all about
You
connection
know?
in the end, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
So, cool, man. I again, it's always a pleasure talking to you.
Yeah, Sam, this
I
is
hope I
super
didn't.
fun.
Yeah, I hope I didn't take much of your time, but
It's all good.
actually, this is like I love talking about those topics, and I would
Yeah.
love to keep having you during those 10 years to find out what you're finding out, man. I think it's pretty wild, and I think it's pretty crazy, but I think something that humanity actually needs right now. You
Yeah.
know, I think we need a lot of like soul healing in a sense.
Yeah. Yeah. Cool. Well, music, meaning, and mystery.ca. I hope, whoever's listening to this will come say hi. Love to hear from people. And yeah, it's super fun, Richard. I love talking to you. I think
Yeah,
you're a cool dude.
thank you, man. I appreciate it. I think you're a cool dude too, and
Right
like
on.
I learned a lot from it, and I love reading your articles, and please keep sending them out, and I hope your research really take off, man, and you can get some conclusions to humanity.
Cool. Well, yeah. So next time we'll talk. Just let me know when your book's out. I'll grab a copy.
Oh, definitely. No, I'll send it one to you, man.
You don't have to, but thank you.
No, it'll be my pleasure. I remember because I did actually 18 lives in Portuguese before I launched my book in Portuguese, because it was kind of like a therapy, and I grew up in Brazil, so it's kind of like one of my mother languages. And but I did a live that I actually started over like it was the day that I got this book, and like the first actually it was like the first thing I read here. This book is dedicated to everyone whose life was saved by rock and roll. And the
Yeah.
minute that I read that, I was like, man, I didn't feel alone in the world. I'll be honest.
Yeah. Yeah.
I was like,
Wonderful.
I have goosebumps all over right now, even my head here. But it just felt that, like I wasn't alone. I was like, man, rock and roll really means something to me. It means something to a lot of other people, including you. And I really appreciate, like you suggesting this book, because it made me a difference, because all the way to that point, I was feeling so bad about just writing the book. It just
Yeah.
felt wrong to tell a story that rock and roll saved my soul. It felt wrong until I got this book. I was like, it's not wrong.
Yeah. It's the truth.
It's the truth.
Yeah.
So I felt way more comfortable. And
Oh, that's wonderful. I'm glad to hear it.
yeah. So will be my pleasure to send you a copy. So as soon as it's ready, I will send you.
Excellent. Punkaste.
Punkaste, man. I appreciate it. Have a
Cool.
good night.
Same to you.
Thank you.
Bye bye.
Bye bye.